The hum of voices filled the colossal convocation hall, an awe-inspiring structure that spanned several kilometers in diameter, its translucent walls showcasing the vastness of the galaxy beyond. Alien diplomats, emissaries, and dignitaries from species that had flourished for millennia whispered amongst themselves, their voices reverberating in the expansive space. It was a place where power and pride clashed, where the ancient races of the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of diplomacy, trade, and war. Today, however, something new stirred among the star-studded faces. At the center of the hall, a large circular dais gleamed under soft blue light. Representatives from the most powerful factions sat, watching with a mix of curiosity and mild disdain as the humans entered. Dressed in sleek, formal attire and projecting a sense of quiet confidence, they were out of place amidst the centuries-old alien elites. The Graal Dominion, a race of massive armored reptilian conquerors, sneered from their corner. Their leader, High Commander Thrackle, flicked his tail in impatience, clearly unconvinced by the spectacle of human arrival. Among the human contingent, the most striking figure was Ambassador Evelyn Hale. A veteran of interstellar diplomacy, she exuded calm determination. Her sharp eyes scanned the room as she adjusted to the weight of the moment. This was not just a ceremonial appearance for the humans. This was their first official entry into the grand political theater of the galaxy. The convocation would decide whether humanity would be treated as a nuisance or a force to be reckoned with. The murmur of conversation hushed as the convocation began. The Speaker of the Galactic Council, a frail, long-limbed entity of unknown origin, stood in the center of the dais. His voice, amplified by an ancient technology, echoed throughout the chamber. "We welcome the species of Earth, a new addition to the convocation. May your presence bring new perspectives." The words hung in the air like a challenge, though no one dared to question the formality. The humans were granted observer status, a title no less demeaning in the eyes of most alien races than student. Their role was clear. They were to watch, learn, and stay in their place. Evelyn stood, her gaze unwavering as she faced the assembly. The moment she spoke, however, her voice cut through the room like a blade. "We are here to learn, yes," she began, her tone measured but filled with a quiet intensity. "But we are also here to offer. Earth brings not just curiosity, but a willingness to contribute, our innovations, our strengths, and our resilience. You will find that we are not easily dismissed." There was a brief silence, followed by the clinking of glass as the alien ambassadors exchanged wary glances. The arrogance that had hung in the air like a thick fog began to feel, just for a moment, less certain. Humanity's audacity was unexpected, unsettling even. But it was the Gruul who made the first move. High Commander Thrackle leaned forward, his yellow eyes gleaming with disdain. His voice, deep and rumbling, filled the space. "Let us see if your species can survive the trials of the galaxy, Ambassador. Words are cheap. Action speaks louder." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, not out of amusement, but recognition of the challenge. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but if there was one thing humanity had in abundance, it was the ability to survive and thrive. Against all odds, the stage was set, and the galaxy, long accustomed to its unchallenged superiority, was about to learn that human strength was not just physical, but something far more dangerous, a strength of will. As the first session drew to a close, the older empires were already plotting, calculating, wondering just what kind of threat humanity posed. But as the delegates departed, one thing was certain: this new species was no mere curiosity. Humanity had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. The trial of fire was a rite of passage, a grueling test designed to strip away any pretense of capability. Each new species invited to the convocation was thrust into a hostile environment, a simulated planet, rife with dangers both natural and artificially created. For the galaxy's most advanced races, it was an easy feat, a mere formality to prove their dominance over the lesser species. The Thesari, with their psychic abilities, The Kolveth, with their technological prowess, and the Grawl, with their brutal strength, had all breezed through the trial in their previous entries. For humanity, however, the trial was an unknown quantity. The planet they would face was called Ignarsix, the barren world. Its surface was covered in ash, jagged rocks, and violent storms. The atmosphere was thick with acidic clouds, the ground trembled with tectonic activity, and the sky pulsed with lightning. Each species was required to traverse the hostile landscape, retrieve a series of ancient artifacts buried deep within a volcanic chasm, and return to their landing site before the storm overtook them. Failure meant death. And for the humans, failure would mean their place in the convocation was sealed, not as equals, but as a failed experiment. Evelyn Hale stood beside Captain James Archer, who was leading the human team. He surveyed the terrain from their ship's viewport, his eyes narrowing. The others, scientists, engineers, military personnel, prepared themselves for the trial, checking gear and weapons, knowing the odds were stacked against them. "Any ideas?" Evelyn asked, though her tone was calm. Archer gave a short chuckle, his eyes still on the chaotic landscape outside. "Ideas? This place is a nightmare. But that's never stopped humanity before." As the humans disembarked onto Ignarsix's hostile surface, the galaxy watched with a mix of skepticism and quiet amusement. The Grawl were already betting on the humans' failure, while the Thessari mentally evaluated their strategy, already trying to predict the humans' next move with their psychic powers. The trial began, and the humans moved swiftly, cutting through the ashen winds with an unrelenting determination. The storm howled, lightning striking dangerously close. The ground shook beneath their feet as fissures split the terrain. But it wasn't the storm they feared. It was the unpredictable nature of the planet, the shifting environment, and the looming threat of the volcanic chasm. As they approached the chasm, the temperature skyrocketed, and molten rock began to pour from the crevices. The humans, ever the pragmatists, quickly assessed their surroundings, while the alien species relied on their inherent abilities. Telekinesis, advanced technology, brute force, the humans adapted. Captain Archer's military background kicked in. "Split up," he commanded. "We'll cover more ground. Keep an eye on the cracks in the earth. They're unstable." The team moved into action. They deployed portable shelters that shielded them from the rising heat, allowing them to set up a temporary base near the chasm's edge. The volcanic activity intensified, the ground crumbling beneath their feet. The other species, observing from the safety of their ships in orbit, murmured in confusion. Humans weren't relying on their physical prowess, nor were they using advanced technology to manipulate the environment. They were thinking on their feet, outsmarting the trial itself. Evelyn watched the humans work, her mind racing. The alien factions underestimated them. They saw them as nothing more than fragile beings struggling to survive. But as the humans coordinated and adapted, their ingenuity became the story. They were not just participants, they were rewriting the rules of the trial. And then, a moment of brilliance. Archer's team discovered the chasm's structural weakness, a series of natural vents that could be used to control the lava flow. They adjusted the terrain by strategically setting off controlled detonations, redirecting the flow of molten rock away from the artifacts. Within minutes, they had created a safe path to the treasure, something no other species had even considered. The final challenge was retrieving the artifact itself, a relic buried at the heart of the chasm. As the humans approached the ancient relic, the ground trembled violently, signaling the approach of the storm's final fury. The pressure mounted, but Archer remained focused. With one last daring move, he reached the artifact, securing it in his hands just as the storm's fury reached its peak. The humans, against all odds, had completed the trial, and not by brute force, psychic power, or technology alone. They had done it through ingenuity, adaptability, and a refusal to surrender. As the human team returned to their landing site, battered but victorious, the alien factions sat in stunned silence. The Grail, Thesari, and Kolveth, once certain of their own superiority, were left grappling with a harsh reality. Humans were not what they had assumed. They were something else entirely. The news of humanity's success in the trial of fire spread like wildfire across the galaxy. For the first time, the ancient species found themselves in a rare position, uncertain. The Grail Dominion, known for their calculated brutality, dismissed the human victory as a fluke, but even they could not ignore the strange shift in the air. Something had changed, and it unsettled them. In the war room of the Grail capital, High Commander Thrakel brooded over holographic displays of humanity's most recent advancements. Earth's military forces, though young and untested compared to the Grail's centuries of conquest, had managed to repel an attempted sabotage by an unknown alien faction on a remote human colony. The humans had not only survived but adapted with unsettling speed. Another victory for them, Thrakel muttered under his breath. His massive tail thrashed against the floor. Are we to be outwitted by these primates? A senior advisor, Commander Vrix, stepped forward cautiously. It may be more than just luck, Commander. The humans have an unpredictable nature. They think beyond conventional tactics. We've seen it in the trial and now in their responses to external threats. Thrakel's nostrils flared as he glanced at the advisor. You believe these creatures could become a problem? Vrix hesitated but then nodded. Their ability to adapt is unlike anything we've encountered before. They don't rely on brute force or psychic might. They rely on ingenuity, speed, and cunning. The Grail had never encountered a species that could thrive under pressure and find solutions that were neither expected nor conventional. What unsettled Thrakel most was how quickly humans had rebuilt after the sabotage attempt. Within days, human engineers had not only repaired their shattered infrastructure, but had upgraded it, making it more resilient than before. The Grail had expected weakness, but what they saw was the stark opposite, a race determined to innovate, to fight, and to learn faster than any other. Across the galaxy, the Kolveth had been monitoring humanity as well. The Kolveth, a species renowned for their mastery of technology and advanced data networks, had always prided themselves on their ability to predict the future. Their computational minds could foresee almost any eventuality, but when it came to humans, the predictions were growing, erratic. In a high-security council chamber on Kolveth Prime, a group of high-ranking officials gathered around a projection of Earth's current technological trajectory. The images shifted from military developments to medical breakthroughs, from infrastructure to space exploration. I thought we had time, muttered Chairwoman Velka, a sharp, angular figure who exuded the confidence of one who had seen countless species rise and fall. But these humans, they moved too fast, too unpredictably. Another counselor, a younger one, raised his voice in concern. Their advancements are happening at an exponential rate. In less than a century, they've gone from a primitive planet-bound species to reaching the stars. Their technological leaps, it's as though they're not following the usual patterns of progression. Velka's brow furrowed. They're not. And that's what concerns me. We knew they were resilient, but this is different. Their ability to adapt to hostile environments, to innovate at the drop of a hat, is not something any of us anticipated. Across the galaxy, whispers began to spread like wildfire. The humans were no longer just a curiosity. They were a challenge. The Thesari, a race of psychic beings who prided themselves on their mental prowess, found themselves at the center of a brewing storm. The humans, they had discovered, were immune to the majority of psychic influence. While they had initially dismissed this as an anomaly, it became clear that humanity's mental fortitude was something they had underestimated. The Thesari had no way of predicting the humans' next move. They could read the thoughts of most species, but not humans. It was as if Earth had produced a species that was inherently resistant to their greatest power. The galaxy's older civilizations, for all their might and wisdom, suddenly found themselves on edge. They began to ask questions they had never dared to before. What if humanity's adaptability was more than just a survival mechanism? What if it was a sign of something deeper, a latent strength that could rival or even surpass the ancient empires? For the first time in centuries, the complacency of the galaxy's elites was shaken. The spark of fear was small at first, but it was growing, spreading, igniting old rivalries, and fanning the flames of mistrust. Humanity was no longer a fringe player in the galactic stage. They had proved they could survive and adapt in ways that defied expectations. And with every passing day, that spark of fear in the hearts of the galaxy's elite empires grew stronger. The darkness of space seemed to grow more ominous as the political atmosphere in the galaxy shifted. Humanity's unexpected victories had rattled the established order, and it wasn't long before the older powers resorted to more clandestine methods to deal with the human problem. The Grawl, the Kolveth, and the Thessari each secretly began plotting, hoping to neutralize the humans without direct confrontation. They saw their superiority being undermined, and for the first time, they weren't certain how to respond. On the human frontier, a small, mining colony on the distant moon of Lyrithar III had become a target. A covert operation, disguised as a natural disaster relief mission, was launched by an unknown alien faction. Their objective was simple: sabotage Earth's supply chain, cripple the colony's infrastructure, and send a message that humanity's rise could be stifled before it went too far. The colony, known for its rare mineral deposits used in Earth's advanced technologies, had been a vital resource for the human effort to expand into deeper space. However, the sudden appearance of unmarked ships in the system didn't go unnoticed by the colony's security team. Leela Tran, a skilled field agent working for Earth's Covert Operations Division, had been stationed on Lyrithar III under the guise of a civilian consultant. She wasn't just a diplomat or negotiator. She had a different role altogether. Her ability to read alien technologies, analyze threats, and neutralize them had made her invaluable. When she first picked up the signs of sabotage, sudden power outages, systems malfunctioning at impossible speeds, she knew it wasn't just an accident. Someone was trying to send a message. At the heart of the colony's main power grid, she found the first clue: a subtle disruption in the communication array that could trigger a system-wide meltdown. The encryption was so advanced that it almost seemed to belong to the Kolveth, who were known for their mastery of cyber warfare. But it was more than just a technical attack. It was a message from someone who wanted humanity to understand its limits. Leela immediately contacted her superior, Captain James Archer, who was stationed in orbit with the fleet. The urgency in her voice conveyed the gravity of the situation. "We've been targeted," she said, "and I think this is just the beginning." "Hold tight." Archer's voice crackled back. "We're sending backup, but keep your head low. Whoever's behind this, they won't hesitate to make sure we don't get to the bottom of it." The sabotage escalated. Unmarked ships, designed to look like nothing more than debris caught in the moon's gravity well, began to deploy nanobot swarms to disrupt the colony's communications network. These microscopic machines infiltrated everything, every data stream, every piece of infrastructure. In mere hours, the colony's grid was on the brink of collapse. Leela knew this was no random attack. She traced the signal back to a particular frequency, one that originated from a hidden ship orbiting a nearby asteroid. But the operation wasn't just a military strike. It was meant to be invisible, untraceable, designed to cripple Earth's ability to respond in time. However, she had one advantage over the unseen enemy: human ingenuity. Leela had been training Earth's engineers for months on how to counteract these exact types of threats. Within minutes, she deployed an electromagnetic pulse device, temporarily disabling the nanobots and restoring partial power to the grid. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it gave her enough time to begin pinpointing the source of the attack. Back on Earth, Evelyn Hale received a report about the sabotage just as the humans were preparing for a diplomatic summit with several lesser-known alien factions. The timing couldn't have been worse. But Evelyn knew the only way to deal with these shadows was to confront them head-on. With her usual calm resolve, She authorized Lila to take any necessary action to prevent further damage and expose the alien factions behind the attack. As the attack's scope became clearer, it became evident that the Graal and the Kolveth were not just passive participants. They were actively involved. They hadn't attacked in force, but they were using underhanded tactics, testing how much humanity could withstand before it cracked. And it seemed humanity had passed their first test. The true danger was beginning to unfold. The galaxy's most powerful empires had decided they couldn't ignore humanity any longer. They would not fight them on the battlefield. Not yet. Instead, they would erode them from the shadows. And so, the game of sabotage began in earnest. Lila Tran's victory on Lirithar 3 had been a temporary one, but the shadow of sabotage still loomed large. Despite her quick thinking, the enemy had learned something crucial. They were not dealing with an ordinary species. Humans could endure, adapt, and fight back. But the message was clear. The galaxy's most powerful factions were prepared to play a long game. On Earth, Ambassador Evelyn Hale found herself in a difficult position. The sabotage was just the tip of the iceberg, and the higher-ups in the Galactic Convocation had begun to tighten their grip on humanity's future. Rumors swirled of a covert alliance between the Graal and the Kolveth, with whispers of other factions like the Thessari offering their subtle support. Humanity was being tested in ways they hadn't anticipated, and Evelyn knew they were playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes were far higher than they had realized. "We need to find out who's pulling the strings," Evelyn said, her voice low and steely as she addressed the Council of Military Advisors. "We're not just dealing with isolated attacks anymore. Someone is orchestrating this." "Do you think the Graal and the Kolveth are in league?" General Donovan, a seasoned Earth military strategist, asked, his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes burned with the same resolve that had guided humanity through countless trials. Evelyn nodded. "It's not just a suspicion anymore. The timing of the sabotage on Lirithar 3, combined with their sudden interest in blocking Earth's access to resources. There's a pattern here. They're scared. But fear, as Evelyn knew, could be a double-edged sword. It could make the galaxy's elite races more dangerous, more unpredictable. And worse still, it could lead them to target Earth with everything they had. "We need to retaliate, but carefully," General Donovan added. "We're walking a fine line. A direct confrontation with the Graal, the Kolveth, or the Thessari could result in full-scale war." Evelyn's mind raced. She had always prided herself on her ability to think several steps ahead, but the depths of this conspiracy were unlike anything she had faced before. The other factions were testing humanity, yes, but they were also attempting to destabilize the galaxy's political order. By undermining Earth's progress, they were trying to maintain their status as the dominant forces in the galaxy. "This isn't just sabotage," Evelyn said, her voice growing sharper. "It's an attempt to control our growth, to stifle our rise. They want us to remain weak, afraid of them. We need to send a message that we won't back down." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. A calculated strike, not necessarily militaristic, but one that would send shockwaves through the galactic power structure. It was time to turn the tables. In the heart of the galaxy, on the sleek, obsidian world of the Kolveth, the leaders of the Hidden Coalition met in secret. Their high-tech, crystal-clear chambers were filled with an unsettling silence. The Kolveth had long prided themselves on their superior intellect, but even their vast computational minds were not enough to predict humanity's next move. "We must move quickly," Chairman Olithar of the Kolveth said, his elongated face dark with concern. "The humans have already surpassed our expectations. Their ingenuity is too great for us to ignore. If we allow them to continue unchecked, they will tip the balance of power." "Agreed," replied Councillor Tharvik of the Graal Dominion, his yellow eyes narrowing with barely contained frustration. "But we must be cautious. If we reveal our hand too early, we risk alienating the other factions. If we push too hard, we could provoke a war we're not prepared for." The three factions, Grawl, Kolveth, and Thessari, had their own secret agendas, and each knew that their collective dominance in the galaxy was at risk. But there was one thing they all agreed on. Humanity, a species they had once deemed insignificant, was now a threat they couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Evelyn Hale began laying the groundwork for a daring gambit. She knew the time for diplomacy was coming to an end. A carefully orchestrated revelation of the sabotage would be their first move. By exposing the alien factions behind the attacks, humanity could present itself as a target of galactic conspiracy, a victim of oppression. The other lesser factions of the galaxy, those not aligned with the major powers, might rally to Earth's side, seeing an opportunity to break free from the older race's control. But there was a risk. Revealing the conspiracy meant exposing the full scope of the threat and inviting retaliation from the most powerful factions in the galaxy. Humanity had never played this high-stakes game before, but Evelyn had learned something important during her years as a diplomat. When the galaxy's elite races are afraid of you, that's when you have the most leverage. Evelyn had made her decision. The time for hiding in the shadows was over. Earth would stand tall, exposed, and unflinching. And if the galaxy wanted to bring them down, they would have to face humanity's strength in ways they had never imagined. The news of the sabotage, once kept hidden under layers of secrecy, was now splashed across every newsfeed, broadcast, and diplomatic transmission across the galaxy. Humanity, as Evelyn Hale had predicted, was no longer going to play the quiet underdog in the galactic theater. If the older races wanted to play dirty, then humanity would expose their underhanded tactics to the stars. The first phase of the plan had begun. It wasn't just a matter of informing the lesser factions of the galaxy about the conspiracy. No, it had to be more calculated, more strategic. Humanity needed to prove that it was more than just a victim. It was a force to be reckoned with. The first strike would come in the form of a daring, high-profile operation, one that would show the galaxy that humanity could fight back, not just with strength, but with guile and precision. On the far side of the galaxy, the Kolveth's hidden facility, nestled inside the mineral-rich asteroid belt of Zodlether, was a technological marvel. Few knew of its existence, and fewer still knew what secrets it held. It was here that humanity's covert operatives, led by Layla Tran, had uncovered the truth behind the sabotage. Data, weaponized nanotechnology, and encrypted communications implicating the Grawl, the Kolveth, and the Thessari in an orchestrated attempt to sabotage Earth's progress. Leela's team had infiltrated the facility months ago, planting viruses that would allow them to disable security systems and extract crucial intel. The time had come to make their move. The mission was clear: hack into the central server, extract all the evidence of the conspiracy, and broadcast it live to every star system, every diplomatic network, and every ship in space. If humanity was going to expose the truth, it had to be done on a grand scale, one that would leave no room for doubt. Status report, Leela whispered into her comms as she crouched behind cover, her breath steady despite the weight of the mission. "We're in," came the voice of her tech specialist, Jonah. "I've bypassed their firewalls. We'll have full access to the server in 2 minutes." Leela's heart raced. This was the critical moment. The Kolveth were notorious for their cybersecurity, and any misstep would mean immediate detection. They had to move fast. Across the facility, the flicker of lights signaled a change in the atmosphere. Something was amiss. The security grid was beginning to shift, and Leela could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Her instincts screamed that the Kolveth knew they were there, and they were about to lock down the entire facility. "We've been compromised." Jonah's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Security is activating in 15 seconds. We need to go. Now." Leela didn't hesitate. She darted toward the central server, her boots silent on the metal floors. A split-second decision to drop a smoke grenade clouded the hallway, buying them precious seconds. She and her team poured into the server room, the flashing lights warning them of the impending lockdown. "Begin extraction," Leela ordered. Jonah's hands flew across his console, fingers tapping out commands at lightning speed. The encrypted data began to flood through the system, ready to be transmitted. But the Kolveth were already responding. The facility's alarms blared, and armed security forces poured into the hallways. Uploading in progress, Jonah announced, his voice sharp with urgency. We've got 30 seconds. Outside, the fleet of human ships, cloaked and waiting in orbit, prepared for the worst. The mission was clear. Provide extraction and support if necessary, but also prepare for an assault on the Kolveth's strategic position should things go wrong. The data transfer hit its peak. Every encrypted file, every incriminating piece of information about the sabotage, was now streaming toward Earth's fleet, along with a message to the galaxy. The truth was out. But as the countdown ticked down, the facility's defenses kicked into high gear. Heavy security drones descended on the team, and a barrage of blaster fire erupted across the room. Lila's team fought valiantly, taking down the drones with precision and firepower. Yet even as the final file was transferred, the facility's power core was destabilizing, and time was quickly running out. Get to the evac, Leela shouted, her voice commanding. Move. Explosions rocked the compound as they made their retreat. The Kolveth, once the masters of this facility, had been outsmarted at their own game. The data was out, the truth revealed. It was only a matter of time before the galaxy saw the conspiracy for what it truly was. The fleet above was already prepared to cover their escape, and as the last member of Leela's team slipped aboard the extraction ship, the Kolveth base began to crumble, its secrets now humanity's to share with the rest of the galaxy. The mission was a success, but it had only begun. The information Lila's team had extracted would send ripples throughout the galaxy. The first strike had been made, and humanity's defiance had been broadcast to every corner of the universe. Now the question was no longer about survival. It was about what the galaxy's old powers would do next. Humanity had just made its move. Would they retaliate, or would they be forced to reckon with the one thing they never saw coming? A species that could not only survive, but expose them in the process. The data was out. The galaxy's most powerful factions, the Graal, the Kolveth, and the Thessari, had been exposed. Their covert operation to sabotage humanity's growth had been laid bare. The evidence streamed across every galactic news network. For the first time in centuries, the equilibrium of galactic politics had been shattered by a species once thought insignificant. Now the rest of the galaxy was forced to reckon with the reality. Humanity was no longer a fringe player. On Earth, the reaction was one of shock and cautious celebration. The political and military leadership immediately convened to discuss the implications of the data release. Ambassador Evelyn Hale stood before the council, her face grim, as the leaders processed the flood of information now at their fingertips. "We've done it," General Donovan said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "We've revealed the conspiracy. The galaxy knows who we're up against now." But Evelyn remained focused, her mind racing. "This isn't over. We've exposed their schemes, but this will only escalate the situation. The Graal, the Kolveth, and the Thessari will retaliate. They'll want to maintain their dominance. We've backed them into a corner," Donovan added, his tone growing more resolute. "And now they'll have no choice but to come after us directly." The room fell silent as everyone processed the reality. Humanity had made its first strike, but it had come with consequences. The galaxy's old powers were too entrenched to allow such a challenge to their authority to go unpunished. At the heart of the Kolveth Council, Chairwoman Olifar's face was a study of seething fury. The data breach had sent shockwaves through their network, and the revelation that their covert operation had been compromised was an unbearable blow. The once proud Kolveth, known for their infallible technological prowess, had been exposed. The other factions were watching, waiting to see how they would respond. "We cannot let this stand." Olifar's voice was cold, the air in the chamber crackling with tension. "The humans have crossed a line. They have dared to expose us, and they will pay the price. But how do we strike back? Counselor Tharvik of the Grawl asked, his massive, scarred face dark with concern. We've underestimated them before. They're not like the other species we've crushed. Their ability to adapt, to fight back, is unlike anything we've encountered. Olithar clenched her fists, her pale skin tight with suppressed anger. We can no longer afford subtlety. It's time to show them our full strength. Meanwhile, in the Thessari enclave, the psychic beings gathered in a darkened chamber, their minds linked in a single, collective consciousness. A vision of the future unfolded before them, a future where humanity's actions had unraveled the fabric of the galaxy's order. The Thessari, masters of psychic influence, had been too confident, too certain of their ability to control the lesser species with their mental power. But humanity was different. The humans had rejected their attempts at manipulation, something no species had ever done before. We have underestimated them, Elder Kalis said, her voice ethereal, filled with the weight of ancient wisdom. They cannot be controlled, and now we must decide if they will be destroyed or embraced. But even as the galaxy's powers fumed and plotted, something unexpected was happening. The smaller factions, the independent systems, and the oppressed races who had long been subject to the whims of the dominant species began to take notice. News of humanity's bravery in exposing the conspiracy spread like wildfire. The so-called lesser species, who had lived in the shadow of the Grawl and Kolveth for millennia, began to rally to humanity's cause. They saw in humans not just a challenge to the established order, but a symbol of hope, a chance to break free from the long reign of oppression. Leaders of the Alliance of the Free Worlds, a coalition of independent systems, issued a statement in support of humanity. The time has come for us to unite against the corrupt powers that have controlled the galaxy for far too long. We stand with humanity in their quest for freedom and truth. At the same time, smaller resistance groups within the Grawl and Kolveth empires began to communicate with Earth's diplomats, offering their support. Whispers of rebellion were growing among the oppressed underclasses of the galaxy's old empires. On Earth, Evelyn Hale watched as the galaxy's political landscape began to shift. The first phase of their gambit had been successful, but the true challenge was only beginning. The galaxy's old powers would come after them, yes, but humanity was no longer alone. They had exposed the truth, and now they had allies in the shadows. What had started as a fight for survival was becoming something much bigger, a movement for galactic change. Get ready, Evelyn said, her voice steady but resolute. This is just the beginning. We've shown them who we are. Now we'll show them what we can do. The galaxy had never been more fractured. The old powers, Grawl, Kolveth, and Thessari, had been shaken to their cores, their centuries of control over the galaxy threatened by a single species, humanity. Yet, the unity they had once maintained, built on a foundation of fear and oppression, was now crumbling, and in its place, a new order was beginning to form. On Earth, Ambassador Evelyn Hale stood before a massive holographic display, the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her. The data had been exposed, the conspiracy unraveled, and the response was swift. The dominant factions were planning retaliation, but the smaller worlds, the independent systems, and even some of the oppressed factions within the old empires were rallying to humanity's side. We've made our stand, Evelyn said, her voice steady yet filled with a quiet determination. Now the question is how we fight this war, not just with weapons, but with the truth. General Donovan nodded. The Grawl, the Kolveth, and the Thessari may control the vast majority of military power, but they've lost the political war. The truth is out there, and it's spreading faster than we anticipated. However, the battle was far from over. The three empires were coordinating their response. Their leaders, once confident in their ability to suppress lesser species, now found themselves scrambling, unsure of how to contain the galaxy's growing support for humanity. It wasn't just about military might anymore. Humanity had ignited something far more powerful: the will to fight for a new order. At the heart of the Kolveth Empire, Chairwoman Olithar paced restlessly in her war room. The blow from the exposure of the sabotage operation had been humiliating, but it had also forced them into a corner. No longer could they rely on subtle manipulation. They would need to crush humanity, decisively and swiftly. "We've underestimated them at every turn," Olithar hissed, her elongated fingers trembling with rage. "We must strike before they unite the galaxy against us." Councillor Tharvik of the Grawl leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowed. "The Grawl Dominion is ready for war. We can assemble an armada within the month. We will end this threat once and for all." "But the Thizari are hesitating," Olithar pointed out. "They are still deciding whether to back us fully or to join with the upstarts." "They'll come around," Tharvik said, his voice cold. "When we show them our strength, the Thizari will have no choice but to fall in line." But the galaxy's fractures were already too wide. On the front lines of humanity's defense, Lila Tran's team worked tirelessly to strengthen their alliances with the smaller factions. They had already started receiving covert support, weapons, resources, and ships from those who saw the galaxy's old order for what it truly was: corrupt and self-serving. The alliance of free worlds was growing stronger by the day, and it was no longer just a collection of desperate outliers. It was a movement. Meanwhile, at the heart of the Thessari enclave, Elder Kalis sat in silent meditation, his vast psychic network pulsing with the energy of the galaxy. He could feel the tides shifting, and he knew that the decision had to be made soon. Would the Thizari back the ancient empires in their pursuit of dominance, or would they take a chance on this unpredictable human race, whose refusal to conform could either lead to destruction or to a new future for the galaxy? As the galaxy teetered on the brink of war, the diplomatic communications from Earth arrived. Evelyn Hale's message was simple, clear, and unflinchingly bold. "We do not seek war," Evelyn's voice echoed across the stars, "but we will not be silenced. The truth is out there for all to see. We stand ready to defend not just our home, but the future of every species that desires freedom. Choose carefully, for the galaxy will no longer be ruled by the few." The message rippled across the galaxy, reaching all corners, including the most oppressed sectors. It ignited flames of rebellion in the hearts of those who had long been subjugated, their dreams of freedom now a tangible possibility. They could see the path forward, and they saw humanity leading the way. The old powers were no longer the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy. Humanity had brought the fight to their doorsteps, and while the first shots of war had yet to be fired, the ideological battle had already begun, one where the very nature of galactic governance was at stake. The Grawl, the Kolveth, and the Thizari may have planned their retaliatory strike, but they could not ignore the growing resistance. Humanity had shown them that there was something more powerful than weapons, more dangerous than fleets and armies. The belief in a better future, the courage to fight for it, and the will to unite the galaxy in its pursuit. In the coming days, the galaxy would change forever.